Hi everyone, it's Kelly from Kellie's Bead Boutique. So if you've watched my channel for a little while, you know that I love knots. So one of my favorite knots is the Josephine knot. I was playing around with it a little while ago and came up with this really cute and super easy, I know I say that a lot, but everything is kind of easy. So it's a cute and easy bracelet. So come and join me and it is going to be one of your favorites. Okay, so today I'm going to be using a little bit of 2mm leather. So I have 2 meters that I've cut into 6 equal pieces, and that's approximately 13 inches a piece. I've also got these little large hole beads from Tierra Cast, and we're going to use those to crimp down. And I'm also going to use a little toggle, a couple 15mm ribbon ends, and a few different assorted sizes of jump rings. And for tools, we're going to need our chain nose pliers and our bent chain nose pliers, and a pair of cutters perhaps, and we'll need a pair of scissors. I'm also going to need a ruler, and we're going to need some painter's tape. Okay, so you want to make sure that you use painter's tape. It doesn't have as much of the sticky on it as regular masking tape, and we don't want to leave any of the residual glue on top of our leather. So I'm going to just take off a couple pieces of that and put it off to the side. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is split these into 2 groups. So I'm going to take one group of 3 and even them up. And they don't have to be perfect because we're going to trim them up on the end. So now I'm going to start with the first part. Now what you have to do is form it into what looks like a little fish. And you want to make sure that the one that's coming down on the bottom here is on top of this tail. So this one must always be going on the up part here on top of the bottom tail there. I'm just going to cover it up and then maybe you'll be able to see that a little easier. So I like to take a piece of tape and stick it right in the middle, and that just kind of holds everything. So now we can see we've got like a little fish, and this one's coming up on the top of this bottom one. Now I'm going to take my other section of 3 and I'm going to place those underneath the head of the fish. And I want to make sure that I don't have too much of my leather underneath here because we need more leather to work with when we're doing our weaving. So I'm going to just stick that down nice and tight. Okay, so this knot is all about just going over and under and over and under. It's super simple. So I'm going to take my little group of 3 here, and I'm going to go, so it's coming underneath here. Now I'm going to go over top of this one. So I'm going to go over top of that. And now I need to go underneath this one. So I just pick them up and go underneath. And just make sure that it is actually going underneath there. Now I need to go over, under, over. So the way that I do that is I pick up that little middle section and just pop that underneath there. So now we've gone over, under, and over. And there you go. You can see we've got the start of our knot here. So now I want to take the tape out, and I hold the knot down when I'm removing that tape. I just want to make sure that it doesn't all fall apart. Now you can see that we've got our knot, but I need to tighten it up a little bit. So I use the bottom part of my hand and the top part to slowly start pulling them together because I want to be pulling these equal. But now that I've got it sort of halfway tightened up, I can see that these are not laying flat. So I need to take a minute and just kind of jiggle these around and get them to lay flat. So I usually pick one that's sort of starting to go. So this one's going nice and flat, and then right here it is kind of twisting, and there all I had to do was just push them, and now that entire row there is nice and flat. So now I need to look at the next one here. So it's coming flat along here. So I'll just push these around, and sometimes you just have to literally take it and twist them to get them to pop over. And now you can see how everything's all nice and flat there. So now I need to close this up, but I want to make sure that I'm pulling everything at an equal distance. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to pull. I can see that these ones need to be pulled a little more, so I'm going to pull those ones up a bit first. There we go. And now they're all pretty equal, so now I'm going to pull at the same time. Now we have a lot of extra leather to work with, so if one's a little bit more than the other, it doesn't really matter. And I pull them all nice and tight. Now you can pull this as tight as you want. I do like to leave a little bit of space in the middle there. It helps when we're measuring later on. for our sizing, and it also just looks a little bit nicer. So there we go, I've pulled it nice and tight. So now you can see that we've got the beginnings of our bracelet and a beautiful little Josephine knot in the middle. So now what I'm going to do is crimp these all together. So I'm going to use these little large hole beads that TierraCast came out with, and the nice thing about those is that you can crimp them. So I'm going to separate these into 3 different sections. We've got our outer 2 and then our inner 2. So I'm going to start with the inner 2 and take one of the crimps and place it over top. Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to just scoosh that up a little bit, and I'm going to give it a little squish. Now I'm going to turn it over and give it another little squish. So I'm squishing fairly hard, but I don't want to completely collapse that. Now I'm going to put on one of the outer 2. And what I like to do is put it just so that they're point to point there. I find if you put them next door to each other, it doesn't really look so nice. And also it tends to push it out a little bit. So I'm going to just go point to point there. And I crimp it down just a little tiny bit. And then I go back and have a look and make sure it is where I want it to go. And then I give it a good squeeze on both sides. And now I'm going to repeat on the outer one here. All right, so I'm going to finish up the other side and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so now you can see I've got all of my crimps added and it's got a nice decorative touch to it. So now I need to measure. So how do we come up with our sizing? Well, most people wear about a 7 to 7.5 inch wrist size. So what I like to do is I'm going to take into account this measurement in here, and that's about an extra inch. So I want to cut this somewhere around the 6-inch mark. So the way that I do it is I take my little center that I left there and I'm going to place it on the 3, because we want to make this about 6 inches long, and this extra little bit here will add that extra inch that we need. So I'm going to place the center on the 3, and then I'm going to go up here and I just kind of find the 6, mark it with my thumb, and then I'm going to trim that off with a nice sharp pair of scissors. Now if you want, you can double check that, make sure that that is around 6, and that's just slightly over 6, so it should be okay. So I'm going to turn it around and place that little center right on the 3, go up to the 6, and just mark that again. Okay, so if I'm lucky, this should be about 6 inches long, which is what it is. So now I'm going to add our ribbon end. So what I need to do is gather up all the end and make sure that it's nice and tight and even, and I'm going to place that on there, and that's a 15 millimeter one and it fits perfectly. So what I'm going to do is line it up, and I just start to sort of slowly close that up. And if you have any, like this one here is starting to sort of poke out, my pliers and push it back in, and then I close it right on the end there. So you can see I'm just kind of encasing that in there. So I look on the other end and that one's pretty good, so I'm going to tighten that up there, and I just give it a good squish. Now these have got little teeth and they will sink right down into the leather, so that'll hold that in there nice and tight. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat on the other side here. And that one's poking out again. Let's give that a little squish. And I like to turn it over and squish on both sides. Okay, so now we've got that on there nice and tight. So now I'm going to add my jump rings and my toggle. Now I do find when you're working with a toggle, on the bar end, it's a good idea to put 3 little jump rings. If you only put 1, it's such a tight fit that it makes it really hard to get up inside the toggle. So I like to add 3 small jump rings. And these are 18 gauge 4.5 millimeter jump rings. They seem to work the best. So you gotta get a really good hand hold on them because they're a little bit tight. So I slip that through there, and then I'm just gonna jiggle it until it pops in there. When you hear that snap, that means it's usually in there nice and snug. So I'm gonna repeat. And the other thing is you want to use 3 versus 2 because we want to orient the end piece here the right way. Super important when you're making jewelry to have the mechanics of your jewelry all sort of figured out. Okay, now on this end, I'm going to use just a little bit bigger jump ring to try and get through the end here. And do that up nice and tight. And now when you go to put it through, it slips in nice and easy. So there you go. Here's a couple different versions of our Celtic knot bracelet. This one is using a nice antique brown that we've got, and this is our lovely antique gray leather. And we have about 6 different colors of the little crimps and all sorts of different toggle clasps and things like that. So there you go, nice and easy. I think it's going to be one of your favorites, and it looks great on both guys and girls. So give it a try. And thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed this, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.